Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome back to Taylor-Made-Cards4u. Well, today I'm going to share with you some Halloween cards that I created using one of the new kits that VectoriaDesigns just released. VectoriaDesigns released a journal kit called Steampunk Halloween. And the reason I call it a journal kit is because it has journal pages, but I really wanted to show you how much more you can do with these kits. As you can see, I was able to use some of the paper and create some great Halloween cards. And they weren't real difficult. Some of them were very simple, where I just used the digital and I added a few embellishments. And then some of them were a little bit more detailed. So that's what I want to share with you today, is how to use printables to create some really fun Halloween cards, specifically using the kit from VectoriaDesigns called Steampunk Halloween. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, so in the kit you're going to get lots of paper, you're going to get banners, you're going to get ephemera pieces, and you're going to get so much to create some of your holiday crafting projects. Now what I love about digital paper is that you can size it down. So right now what you're looking at is 8 of the pieces that come in the set, but what I did is I sized them down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so that way I could fit 4 designs on one sheet. And then that way I can create 8 cards very easily. And you're also going to get lots of ephemera pieces as well. And with the ephemera pieces, you can either print out the entire sheet, or if you have a Word document, you can easily cut out some of the items that you may not need. And that will also help you to save on some of the ink in your printer. Another thing that I like to do when I'm getting ready to create several cards is I like to pre-cut some of my cardstock. So I went ahead and I cut out some of my black cardstock because I know that I wanted to use that for my backing. And then I also kind of looked around to see what else I can use to embellish some of my cards. Now you know that I have a lot of Tim Holtz items, and he is a vintage inspired designer. And what I love about his product, especially when I pair it with VectoriaDesigns, is it works perfectly. So I was able to use not only some of my old items, which are those numbers on the Remnant rubs, but I was also able to incorporate some of the newer Halloween items as well. Now we're going to do a couple of techniques on these cards. I'm going to show you how to create a very simple card, and then I'm also going to show you how to create a more detailed one. So the first thing I want to do is I want to share with you just sort of what you can do with some of the edging of the paper. There are dies out there that will make your paper look torn or jaggedy, as these are here, or you can just simply tear them. There's neither wrong or right way to do that, but it just gives it a little bit more interest when you're creating the cards. Now the die set that I used, as you can see, left some of the white spot on this particular image, but I'm going to be able to use some of my distress ink to edge that up, and then you're not going to even be able to see any of the white at all. So don't fret when you are cutting up some of your items if you do have a little of the white space showing, because you can simply come in with some distress inks or distress oxides and add some of the ink to the edge, and not only will it cover up the white spots, but it will also add a little bit more vintage interest. Now the card I'm going to create for you first is a very simple one, and I want to show you that you can easily create beautiful Halloween cards without a lot of effort. When you're working with digital items, a lot of times the layering is done for you. So as you can see, you can find lots of paper images that have different elements on them already. This one has the cogs, you have the little skeleton with the hat, and it's already decorated for you, so you don't need to add a lot of embellishments to it. Some of the paper is a little bit less embellished, so that's when you might want to add some of your own crafting stash to just give it, again, more interest. Maybe you want to add more layers, perhaps you want to create more of a 3D effect. So there's lots of ways that you can go. So for this first card, I'm going to go ahead and just layer it down on some black cardstock. And I chose to just go straight on the black cardstock because I wanted that beige to contrast nicely. And if I would have added onto the decorative cardstock, I think it might have gotten lost a little bit more. It's little details like this that will really make your cards pop. So when you are going to create some Halloween cards, think about the cardstock, think about the color combinations, and make sure that you mix and match your cardstock, which will be most pleasing or appealing to the eye. So the ink that I'm using, or I should say the adhesive that I'm using, is the 3-in-1 Beacon, and I like to use this for thicker cardstock. If the paper is too thin, you probably don't want to use the liquid glue because it will wrinkle your paper. Now, not to say that may not be a good look for you, but just kind of keep that in mind when you are choosing your adhesive. And for a sentiment, I'm going to go ahead and just use this label tape that came out this season from the Tim Holtz Ideaology collection. As you can see, the label tape has several sentiments that you can use. And what's fun about this tape is it is like the old label makers that we used to use, where you're going to have some of those letters raised. So it's kind of cool. So you'll get a little bit of texture on your card as well. Now, there's several words that you can choose from here, and I chose to go with just the very simple one. I went with Halloween, I believe. But there's lots of choices, and you can fit it anywhere on this cardstock. Now, if you didn't have this labeled tape, then you can certainly pull out one of your stamp sets and find a small sentiment to be able to stamp on it. So don't fret if you don't have every single piece of product that I'm working here. There's lots of combinations that you can work with. So go to your stash. Don't feel like you have to buy everything out there. I like to show you how to incorporate some of the new stuff into your designs, but certainly pull out your old stash and make use of that. Another item that I like to incorporate into my cards, and I tend to hoard this a little bit. I'm not really sure what my obsession is with these Remnant rubs, but I have several pages full of these. So whenever I am creating cards, I certainly pull these out and see if I can incorporate them, because I'm not going to throw them away. I love these things. And numbers are great for Halloween. You can go as simple as using the number 31, or just add numbers for interest. They always create great backgrounds. And you're going to see on several of these cards here that I'm creating, I'm going to use numbers. So that is an ongoing theme for me. Now, if you've never used the Remnant rubs, they're really fun to work with. You get a lot of different designs on one sheet of paper, and they have different themes as well. So I'm going to just add a few numbers here and there just to add some interest. And then as you see, I'm using a stylist, but the Remnant rubs come with a popsicle stick that you can also use to rub those down. Now, a lot of times I will just cut around certain Remnant rubs, and then I'll just use what I want. But if you're concerned about catching any of those other items, just cut around them. You don't necessarily have to have extras on the sheet that you're working with. You can easily fussy cut some of these Remnant rubs, so that way you're only using the piece that you want to. And as you see here, I'm adding the number 31 just to kind of tie in the Halloween theme. Now, as you see, this is a very simple card, but there are other ways to actually embellish some of your cards, even the most simple ones. You can easily add brads. There are metal elements out there that you can add, just add subtle effects, but they really tie the card together. And if you are concerned about some of your pieces sticking down and not folding up, brads are perfect for that as well. So I went ahead and I decided to add 4 brads on the corners, just because it's a very simple design, and I wanted to add just a little bit more interest to the card. And then before I did that, actually, I decided to go ahead and trim down the edges, because when I'm creating my cards, I like to have a white border, which is the base of your card. So I think I started, my black cardstock was 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I did end up trimming down all of the sides, so that way when I did mount it to my card, I'd have some of that white space showing. Now in this kit, you're going to get lots of designs just like this. So again, if you don't have a lot of supplies and you just simply want to work with some of the designer paper, you can make some great Halloween cards with not much effort at all. And you don't have to go out and buy a lot of supplies either. So if you are crafting on a budget, a lot of times printables or digital paper is the way to go, because you can print out as much as you need or as little as you need. It really is up to you. And you can also resize the paper. So if you only want to use a portion of it and not print the whole thing, you can do that as well. So there's lots of options when you are crafting with digital images. So once I had all of my brads inserted, like I said, I went ahead and I chose to trim down some of the edges. And then as a final touch, I went in and I rounded the corners with my We Are Memory Makers corner rounder. So just small tweaks, small embellishments to create a really fun Halloween card. And as you can see, I didn't use any stamps on this, so it was all paper and all embellishments. Now the next card that I'm going to create for you is a little bit more detailed, and I wanted to be able to show you that your cards don't necessarily have to be simple when you're working with digital images. The next card that we're going to create, we're going to be using a technique that is one of my favorites, and this is collaging. And this is where you're going to take some of your designer paper that you've printed out and you're going to tear it up and you're going to create a background. Now when I am doing this next technique, I do like to print on thinner paper because it just will move a little easier when you are collaging it. So when you are printing out your paper, do it on just regular copy paper, because you're going to get the best results that way. If you do print out on heavier cardstock, it's going to be a little bit heavier and it's going to be a little bit more difficult to collage. So that is my preference when I am collaging. So as you can see, I just kind of took some of my paper and I tore it up, really no rhyme or reason, and I'm using my Mod Podge to just add a layered background to my cardstock. Now the background of course is going to be heavier because this is what's going to be the base of your card. So make sure that again, when you are printing out your images that you're going to be collaging, that's going to be done on the thinner copy paper, and then your background is going to be your cardstock. And then once you have all of your layers down, what I like to do is I just like to take a final brush over the entire surface, and that way I can make sure that it is completely sealed. If you need to come in with your fingers, certainly do that, as I'm doing here. It's just a really nice way to make sure no pieces are coming up or curling up. For this, even though on some of my other videos I've said for your vintage cards, it's kind of fun to have some of your corners curling up, but for this technique you want to make sure everything is glued down securely. And then you can either set it aside to dry, or you can use a heating tool as I'm using here. So once it's completely dry, then the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to cover up some of those white edges that you see from when you tore the paper. And this is where you want to use some of your distress crayons. Now, I use distress crayons. I don't use distress inks because I like the way that I'm able to smear the crayons on my collages. So as you can see, I'm just kind of adding it all over where the white space is, and then I'm going to come in with some of my Mod Podge and I'm going to rub it in, and this creates a really great background and it smears it really cool. So it's a technique that I love to do, and you get fantastic results every single time. And then again, once you have all of your crayons covering the white spaces, then you're going to come back in with your heating tool just to give it another once over. Okay, so at this point you can either work with what you have, or you can trim down your collage. And I chose to actually trim it down because I wanted to have those jaggedy edges. Now one thing I will say, if you are going to run this through your Big Shot, make sure that you put some sort of shim or paper over your collage, because if you don't, you're going to end up with lots of ink and crayon on those plastic sheets that or plastic pieces that you use to run through your Big Shot. So make sure that you protect the plastic on your Big Shot, because you're going to have an inky crayon mess if you don't. All right, so once I had trimmed it down, I was ready to add it to my cardstock. And as you can see, I'm just using my 3-in-1 beacon glue to add it to my black cardstock. And then once I have it on my black cardstock, then I'm ready to go ahead and continue adding any more embellishments or ephemera pieces, because our background is now complete. Now, while this background is just perfect on its own, I do want to go ahead and lighten it up a little bit. As you can see, the background is pretty dark, so I'm going to come in with some pieces of the printed paper, and I'm going to cut out some of these advertisements that kind of look like labels, and that will just not only bring more interest to your card, but it will break up the background as well. So you can easily pick and choose pieces out of the paper kit to just cut them out, fussy cut them, choose some of the pieces that you like best to add to the interest of your card. And then I'm going to also come in with some numbers to, again, break up that background and add a little bit more interest. And for this card, I decided to use those big numbers because, again, the background is very dark, and I wanted to be able to break it up just a bit. When you are creating layers, don't be afraid to cover up some of those layers. I know a lot of people are hesitant. They see something that they like and they don't want to cover it up. Now, not to say if there's a piece that you really like on your layer, don't cover it up. Like, for instance, that little skeleton man with the hat, I didn't want to cover him up because I liked the way that he looked. So I was strategic enough to place those numbers off to the right, so that way I could still have him kind of popping through. And with that, my background for the most part was complete. I was really happy with it. I was able to break up the colors. Now I just needed to find a focal point. And for that, I was able to go to one of the ephemera pieces to pick a little character that I could use. My initial thought was maybe to use a paper doll, but when I saw this little skeleton man with his suitcase, I thought he was perfect. So I didn't want to cover up my background too much, so that's when I chose to actually go in and fussy cut him out and use him as a layer on top of my background. Now, before you glue down a larger focal point, make sure your background is exactly the way that you want it. So if you want to add a sentiment, if you want to add maybe another embellishment, think about that before you glue down your focal point, especially if it is a bigger piece. I knew that I wanted to add a little sentiment to kind of tie the card in together, and I decided he was going to be a pharmacist, or maybe a traveling salesman selling some of his pharmaceuticals. So I wanted to use one of these labels from the Tim Holtz collection to, again, break up the background and kind of tie my card together. So I went ahead and I picked out one of the labels, and I went with one that had more of a black and white background because I thought that would match the card a little bit better. And then I wanted to choose a sentiment. Now, the sentiment that I ultimately chose was a longer sentiment. So in order for it to fit on my card and not have my focal point cover it, I did have to trim it down. The sentiment that I ended up choosing said, "All orders promptly attended to." And I thought that was a perfect sentiment to tie in with my pharmacist or my traveling salesman, whatever you want to call him. But it was a perfect sentiment to kind of tie my card together. And as you can see, it is a black background with the beige letters, so it doesn't get lost in the background either. When you are working with darker backgrounds, especially for these Halloween cards, you're going to find a lot of the darker colors, some of the browns, blacks, and it's important that you are strategic or just take into consideration some of your embellishments, because some of them won't work with these darker colors. So when you are choosing your embellishments, don't commit to it by gluing it down. Just kind of see if it works. With that pharmacy label, I could have probably gone with the red, but I wanted to have that white background on the darker color just to stand out a little bit more. And then once I was happy with the placement of my sentiment, then I was ready to adhere my focal point, which is this little skeleton salesman. And then to completely seal him and all of my other items, I did bring out my Mod Podge once again, and I just did one final layer. Now, I don't know if you noticed that the Mod Podge that I use is called, I want to say it's called Vintage Mod Podge or Antique Mod Podge, and it has that antique tone to it, which is what I really love. So I'll make sure that I link that below for you, because a lot of the Mod Podge is just clear or white, but I like this one, especially for some of my vintage inspired cards, because it does add a little bit of that vintage tone to your layers. So as you can see, you can go as simple or as detailed on some of your Halloween cards when you are using digital printables. Now, the kit that VectoriaDesigns is releasing today is going to be available in their shop, and typically they will do some sort of a discount within the first few days of release. So if this is something that you want to grab, be sure to check it out, because there's lots of great images and paper to use for your Halloween crafting. And if you are a journal maker, then you're going to love this kit, because there's lots of journal pages as well that you can use to create some of your Halloween journals. So as always, I'll leave a list of all the products that I've used to create these cards, along with the links to the store. And if you've enjoyed my video, I would certainly appreciate a thumbs up. Now, this is one of the videos in my Halloween series. So if you are interested in being added to my giveaway list, make sure that you do leave a comment and let me know what you thought of this product. Typically what I do with my holiday video series is I will just grab some comments from all of my videos, and then I'll do a giveaway at the end of my series. So be sure to leave a comment if you are interested in being entered into my drawing. And don't forget, you do have to be a subscriber, and if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button before you head out, and make sure that you do click on that little bell, so that way you are notified when my next video comes out. Now make sure that you do stick around to the end of the video, because I am going to be sharing with you 4 other cards that I created using this kit. They're all just a little bit different, but they have this great theme, steampunk theme, using the kit from VectoriaDesigns. And if you are interested in any of these cards, I believe I will be adding them to the shop. So make sure that you check out the cards section if you are interested in grabbing any of these cards. All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and make sure you check out some of the cards at the end of the video, and we'll see you again next time.